Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have a great discussion today about how to continue keeping your business successful. Because you know what? We struggle on occasion, and there are times where our businesses are a challenge. And so we need to know how we get past those humps, and not only get past those humps, but become even more successful, because that's the key. It's not just to get up there, it's to keep going. See, I read the book from my guest. And so please join me in welcoming Paul Thallner to our program today. Welcome, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm great, Deb. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Perfect. I love it. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dig in. So Paul Thallner is a principal and member of the global leadership team at Daggerwing Group, a change consultancy that works with Fortune 100 companies. Previously, Paul led major culture integration, transformation, and workplace analysis projects as a partner at the Great Place to Work Institute and at his own firm, High Peaks Group. He has over 25 years working with executive teams to identify and implement strategic change initiatives. And in that time, he's held leadership positions in nonprofit, government, and private sector organizations. He is also the author of the book I just mentioned, Reinventing Resilience: How Organizations Move Beyond Setbacks and Grow Through Challenges. So again, Paul, welcome.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I always like to find out from my guests how they got to where they are today, because I think it's very interesting to know. Plus, I'm just curious, but how did you determine that this is your passion in life, at least for now?
Yeah, it was a process of discovery for me, but one thread that carries through my entire career is my curiosity about people and what makes groups behave the way they do. You know, one of my first jobs, or actually my very first job out of college, was working for my fraternity, like at the national office of my fraternity, where I got to go around from, different campus to campus and, try to convince these young college students that, there's a little bit more to fraternity life than just, partying. There are values and other things that come along with, and responsibility and leadership that come along with all this stuff. And one of the observations I made back then, this was ages ago now, was that no matter where I went, I could go to an Ivy League school somewhere or a small liberal arts school or a state school, different parts of the country. It seemed like there was a common cast of characters, and there were some common responses to various things, or common behaviors in groups, no matter where they came from or what their configuration was. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit about why it is groups tend to do what they do, and even when they are, maybe not supposed to do whatever it is they're supposed to do. And then, so that led to kind of a little bit of a lifelong curiosity around, why do some groups succeed? Why do some groups fail? Why could there be a really great, highly qualified, blue ribbon group of people tasked with some very important, objective, and then they fail miserably, but then, a ragtag group of people who've never met seem to somehow persevere and make amazing things happen. It's always been something that's been very, very fascinating to me. And, as destiny would have it, I found that found relatively late in life that there's a career around that. There's a field called organizational development. I had no idea that is all about sort of the philosophy of groups and the psychology of groups and why it is they behave the way they do. So after a stint as an executive director of a nonprofit organization where I kind of ascended into this role because of my subject matter expertise, I didn't really have any leadership experience at all and was struggling as a leader. And what I needed was some training and some way to think about. So I thought about a lot of things, and as a lot of mid-career folks think about getting an MBA or whatever, my sister actually said, maybe you should try this master's degree in organizational development because they have not only, business strategy, and it's, I got my degree at Case Western Reserve University, great program, the Master's in Positive OD. Not only do they have business strategy, and it's run out of the business school there, but they also have a huge sustainability track within the program and also an executive coaching track within the program. So you not only learn how to be a coach leader, but you get coaching and you learn from amazing people. So that's when I decided to do that, even though I thought, it's a little weird. It's a little fluffy. I'm not quite sure this is my thing. It feels a little like, it's all about feelings, not really.
A little woo-woo.
Yeah, a little woo-woo. So I was a skeptic, but went anyway. And it was life-changing for me.
Because sisters are wise people.
Sisters are wise. We need to listen to our sisters literally every time. So, went to that program and suddenly, I was like, I really feel like I found my calling, love doing this, love helping organizations. I love being the kind of, guide on the side with with executives who are really trying to make positive change inside their organizations or, make their organizations more impactful in the world. And I get to do that every day. And it's so fun. It's a great role. And I love Daggerwing Group. I love where I am and get to work with amazing colleagues every day, doing some really cool things.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I was looking at Daggerwing's website, and it starts with do change right the first time.
Yeah.
And, so that sounds easy, right? Because we don't want to be repeating ourselves. But why is it so difficult? Why is it such a challenge to get it right the first time?
Yeah, well, a couple of reasons. One is I think mostly people believe that you do a change project or a change initiative in an organization the same way you fix a car, right? Like there's a screw loose or
there's
a hose
this part
disconnected.
That goes
you
here
just kind of like plug it back together, it'll be fine. When people are involved, it's an entirely different story because we all have our own emotions, we all have our own ways of seeing the world, we have our own values, and we have our own experiences that we all bring to the organization, and all of that. When that intersects, it creates the culture of an organization. And trying to change anything within a system disrupts that culture that everybody's used to, everybody's comfortable with. Even if they don't like it, they're comfortable with it. They know how to work with it.
And we don't like change.
Don't like change. So oftentimes that creates a lot of resistance in organizations. Resistance, of course, escalates the failure rate. And a lot of many people, I'm sure, have heard the stat that over 70% of change efforts fail. So why do we keep doing it, right? So, but the cost of not changing is higher than the cost of trying. So we have to keep trying.
Right. And I, as I mentioned, you wrote this great book, Reinventing Resilience, How Organizations Move Beyond Setbacks and Grow Through Challenges. And we're going to talk more about exactly what you mean by resilience. But as I was reading it, one of the things that struck me was that you talked about the fact that whether it's a classroom, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a business, when something's not going the right way, we want to try to fix the people as opposed to looking at the entity and saying, why, what do we need to fix here?
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And this was really the genesis of the book. The whole idea of the book came from a lot of my observations during the pandemic when people were where there was lots and lots of free advice out there about how to sustain yourself through these challenging times. And all of that advice is really, really good advice. The whole, mindfulness, well-being, all of that great stuff. Very, very important. It became commercialized and dropped into organizations as a solution to help those individuals. It was something an organization could do to help people maybe feel like they were still part of something, that the organization cared about them, and that there was, to provide, an acknowledgement of the challenges that people were going through. And I think that's very, very important and something organizations really needed to do and still need to do. But it's not enough, right? Because the what's underneath that is this fundamental problem-solving notion that if we just simply create an organization full of resilient people, all of a sudden the organization itself will be resilient. And that logic doesn't follow, right? So, I mean, I talk about this arrow metaphor, right? So like, if you put a bunch of arrows together, they're harder to bend, but if you have one, it's really flexible. They're designed to be flexible for a reason. They actually wobble through the air to stay on track. And that's kind of like us in life, right? We all wobble.
Right. We will wobble around and
yeah, that's how we stay on target, is to literally wobble our way through everything. But we lose that flexibility when we have sort of these kind of unilateral or kind of whole, system-wide solutions for problems that seem to be individualized, right? So it's a little bit of a tricky thing to just assume that if we have a bunch of strong arrows, we're going to have a strong organization. But the reality is all those arrows are scattered all over the place.
Right. Yeah. Did you even aim at the right target?
Exactly.
Did you throw them as opposed to using a bow? All of those various things.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I dig metaphors, by the way. So there's more to come.
Yay!
But the thing about organizations is that, but sort of working on solving individuals also keeps people from focusing on the bigger problem or the bigger challenge of what's the environment that we're creating that is causing the stress in the first place.
Right.
What are the systemic issues, whether it's the policies, the practices, the ways of working, the culture, ways of managing and leading, those kinds of things all affect how people perceive their workplace. And no amount of wellness training is going to overcome any difficult challenges they may have with their boss, for instance, right? Like, it's not like I can't meditate my way out of a toxic relationship with a boss.
Right.
So you have to work on the systemic issues. Leaders need to lead differently. Policies need to evolve with the times, practices, all of it, right? So I think that's what I'm encouraging organizations to do, is to really think about what do they want for their people, and how do you create an environment that delivers that for them?
Right. And if that's not happening, why? I had a conversation with someone several months into COVID, and of course it was so bizarre because now I home office. I've home office for 20 years. But for people who were in an office, they were in on Friday and home on Monday. I mean, there was no, you didn't have a lot of time to prepare for it. The business certainly didn't have a lot of time to prepare for it. And I was talking with this one manager, and he told me he was so concerned that, his people were not getting the work done. He didn't trust them. And I said, well, are they getting the work done at home? Well, and I said, did you trust them when they were in the office? And he paused. and I said, that would be your problem. If you didn't trust them when they were under your little thumb, then when they're not under your little thumb, that's not going to get better. And I said, so you have a totally different issue. It is not remote working. It is, you don't trust your workers for whatever reason. And he just looked at me like I was nuts and wandered off. But that really was it. The systemic problem was that he didn't trust him. Now, were they non-trustworthy? Who knows? It could have just been he was a micromanager, and the poor micromanagers of the world, their heads all exploded about the third week of COVID, right? Because they just couldn't stand it anymore.
Yeah.
And but that really was, kind of the thing was he didn't trust them in the office. So how could he trust them when they were not in the office?
Yeah. It's these things like COVID
Mm-hmm.
or the recession
Mm-hmm.
or any of these global challenges
Mm-hmm.
that are happening, right? Supply chain,
Mm-hmm.
any of these things are these giant headwinds that
Mm-hmm.
that hit an organization
Mm-hmm.
and bring to the surface all of these things that you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, right?
Right.
Whether it's lack of trust, lack of
Mm-hmm.
flexibility, lack
Mm-hmm.
of ownership in their work,
Mm-hmm.
poor culture, all those things, they tend to reveal
Right.
all of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And the mistake I think organizations make is they focus on the problem as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the opportunity
Right.
that's there,
Mm-hmm.
and folk like the old adage, you can't control the winds, but you can adjust your sails.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the being upset with COVID
Mm-hmm.
or being upset with
Mm-hmm.
remote work or being upset with
Right.
supply chain. It's
Mm-hmm.
like being mad at the weather. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why? There's no
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you
Right.
know so but what you can do is focus people's attention on what's working in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
What maybe let's talk about how productive people actually are.
Mm-hmm.
What do they need in order
Right.
to be even more
Mm-hmm.
productive given this
Mm-hmm.
reality that we're all working in? How do we keep people wanting to
Mm-hmm.
work for us when they've got seemingly
Right.
endless choice now to
Mm-hmm.
do whatever it is they want,
Mm-hmm.
including check out of the workforce altogether,
Mm-hmm.
which was almost never
Mm-hmm.
thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
So, organizations do need to be thinking about what kind of environment are they creating?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of environment are they creating that keeps their people really engaged in the work,
Mm-hmm.
engaged in
Mm-hmm.
being part of it. And it doesn't have to be like a super kumbaya team and family kind of
Right.
thing, but it does have to meet people's needs,
Mm-hmm.
and those needs have evolved over time.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think COVID probably brought a lot of that to the surface. And it was very interesting to be parts of, online meetings because, couldn't meet in person and just hear people talk.
Mhm.
And then when there are the opposite, that's what's so cool. I interviewed a gentleman several years ago who had and still has a very large business, and he's a government contractor. So it's, large in people and in money and all sorts of things. And he said his ultimate goal, and it was fulfilled quite a long time ago, was when he could go on vacation and not worry. And he said because he had good people. And he said, did you have some people who weren't? Sure. And it wasn't that they weren't good people. It was that maybe they'd come in half hour late, all of these various things. But he said the key was he had good people in the right positions.
Mhm.
And he trusted them. Comes back to that word trust, right? And he empowered them also. They could make the decisions without calling him and saying, and they knew it. They knew that he trusted them enough to do that. And I thought, can I go work there? I want to work for that guy because that culture sounded like a fantastic place.
Mhm.
And he just really, it was his goal. He said it was actually one of his goals also to have them go on to better jobs because he felt like kind of the parent sending
Yep.
them off into the world. So they did, they paid for college, they paid for trainings, all of those things. And he said, but of course, here's the key. They don't go,
Mhm.
Because they know where they are is a wonderful place to be. And
Right.
so they stay there or they go and they come back.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was so interesting to talk to him because it is very rare.
I love that. I mean, well, it is. I mean, talk about creating a resilient organization that can survive
Mm-hmm.
lots of challenges.
Right.
An organization that has, a lot of earned trust among people is one that is, in my opinion, very, very resilient and can withstand a lot, right? So especially withstand a lot of temptation. Like the opportunity or offer to go somewhere else, or to,
or even just to come into the office 15 minutes late because the boss isn't there.
Right. All of those things. Those are very important things that could, help organizations really maintain that high, not only high levels of trust, but trust that ends up accruing to the point where you have a backlog, sort of a reserve that enables you to really tap into it during those more challenging moments, which is sort of a hallmark of resilient organizations. It's not about getting knocked down and then scraping and crawling your way back to where you were when you got hit. That's not, that is what a lot of people believe resilience is. And I think that is technically the definition. But what I like to think about for organizations is an idea of reinvented resilience, where it's about how do we look at a challenge as an opportunity to grow as a result of it, grow because of it, not just this thing that slaps us in the face that causes everybody to kind of panic and run fire drills and then just simply, kind of make it go away as quickly as possible because it's unpleasant. It's an opportunity to really grow and evolve and imagine new possibilities and new ways forward and new ways of working to evolve the business into a direction it needs to go.
Right. So how do you define resiliency?
Yeah. I think the first thing to think about, or first difference, I called my book Reinventing Resilience because I wanted to give people a new way to think about resilience. Number one is that resilience scales to the organizational level, right? So we all think about, am I resilient, or other people resilient? Are great, but all of the same qualities of resilient individuals scale up to the organizational level. So that's number one. And then the way I define resilience, I alluded to a minute ago, is it's the ability to grow because of challenge, to really look at those moments that are of peak crisis or challenge and use that as a way to grow through those challenges and not just simply survive them.
Right. And I think that's the critical part of this is, we want to get back to the status quo. We want to, whatever it was, we want to fix it, but then we have to go past it. We have to learn from the mistakes. We have to learn from the positives too. And because hopefully there's lots of those, but if we're just getting back to where we were, then the company, the organization is not going to grow.
And isn't learning, right? So I think that's what's implied in this idea of just simply getting up after being knocked down. It's like, okay, I'm done. I'm good. The goal was to just get back up again. And we all think of that as successful resilience. But what it doesn't take into account is the learning that happens as a result of being knocked down in the first place, right? So why did I get knocked? Why was I standing where I was standing?
How do I keep from being knocked down again?
How do I avoid it? Or how do I get a little bit stronger? How do I, get support, other resources to make that easier to handle next time if it's something that's inevitable? But in order to do all that, the way I define this through a number of interviews and research is organizations need the courage and confidence to grow through challenges, right? So this idea of, collective courage and collective confidence, not just one individual heroically standing on the hill, like sort of being the kind of flag bearer for all things, but like everybody believing that the organization can go forward and make it through, even though they don't know what challenges lie ahead. They believe they can do it. And then, the courage to face those challenges when they do ultimately appear, right? Because that is the ultimate kind of definition of courage, is to face those fears and to not shrink away from them or avoid them or run away, but to actually say, you know what, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this, but I definitely need to be looking at it, and that's difficult for a lot of organizations to do when they're facing a challenge, because a lot of times they just get stuck and go into panic mode the same way individuals do. They have, they get a amygdala hijack, as they call it, and they go into fight, flee, or freeze mode. As an organization,
and we do freeze an awful lot of the time.
That's typically what organizations will do. They'll freeze, or or take some drastic action, like immediately do cost cutting or layoffs, or which sometimes is absolutely necessary, but it's a response. Sometimes it's a reflexive response and not one based on growing through a challenge.
Right. And I think we obviously saw a lot of that during COVID. And of course, the hard part was the not knowing. We all laugh now when we think back, and we were told 2 weeks, we're going to shut everything down for 2 weeks, right? And we all went, yeah, right. And that would have been great, right? That really, and it wasn't, we don't want to blame anybody, for any of that, but it wasn't going to run its course in 2 weeks. I mean, that was just not going to happen. And so, but companies didn't know, was it 2 months? Was it 2 years? More than 2 years, we're still dealing with this. I mean, all of those things. And that's, that really challenges anybody, that whole not knowing thing. So how do you work with companies when they're really in this? We have absolutely no idea what the future holds, because markets come, markets go, trends go, all these various things. But with something like COVID, and hopefully we don't have to deal with this again, but when it's just, oh my gosh, we don't know what's going to happen. How do you work with that?
Yeah. I think I'm going back to this courage and confidence idea, because I think organizations do need to recognize that a couple of things, the more resilient organizations, or the ones that I study that show strong signs of resilience, are the ones that understand that they have been through things before. In my book, I talk about the oldest company in the world, I think it was started in 1500, and it's still going. It's a small Japanese company. So clearly not operating the same way it did back then.
Right.
Like a lot of things have changed.
You've got electricity and
little things like that. So when you redefine your relationship with change and say, like, it's actually inevitable, and if you kind of recognize that it's going to happen anyway, you can either have it you can either have it done to you, or you can sort of be intentional about it. So I think the idea of being intentional about change, looking down the road, and really kind of understanding that there are a lot of things you can control, because if you just do a little bit of looking back on the things that worked before, you can say, like, what, this kind of reminds me
pretty
of
similar.
Or maybe it's not similar at all, but we've done 50 hard things before. So maybe we can do another 51st hard thing.
Right.
So I think that's where organizations tend to, where organizations tend to not do deep thinking. When they get stuck, just like a person, you see a bus coming, you freeze.
Right.
You forget that you can move. Right. So similarly, I think organizations need to just sort of recognize that they do have lots and lots of history, resources at their disposal, talent, experience, expertise that they can rely on to move forward in a positive direction, even though these challenges might be unknown to them. Like there could be competitors. Like, this is the old Silicon Valley adage, right? Like there's always somebody in a garage somewhere building a software,
getting ready to start selling books,
ready to take
or develop
over
a computer.
Yeah, right. So you should just assume that. And I think that's so if you walk around paralyzed by fear, being kind of, trying to amass more armor to withstand stuff, then you're only limiting yourself.
Right. Well, and, we see so many companies that do this is the way we've always done it type of business. And right now, probably the best example of that is Bed Bath & Beyond. They're going completely under. They've tried. And I was listening this morning to a program on the radio, and it was a business expert, and he said they never quite caught on to the fact that who they were competing with. And so he gave the example. He said, he wanted to buy a king size comforter. He did go in there. Did they have what he wanted? No, not really. Could he find somebody to help? No, not really. He went back and he went online to several different online places and found lots of things he really wanted in, color, size, price, all of those things. And he said, and that was pretty much what has happened to Bed Bath and Beyond. It was, well, this is how we operated 10 years ago. And so we're not going to, we're not going to compete against Walmart, Amazon, because this is the way we've always done it. And then I loved his example. He said, the ones that are doing well against the Amazons, the Walmarts, are those that have really gone back to being specialized. So they might only sell king size comforters. And he said, are you limiting yourself? Sure. But people know if you want the best king size comforter, that's where you go. And so, yeah, but Bed Bath & Beyond is definitely an example of a company that would not change with the times. I'm guessing that their employees were going, hello.
Yeah.
And here's what we're hearing. And they just, nope. This is the way we've always done it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not resilient. Right. So I think at some point, there's you see this with a lot of companies, especially ones where we love to do the forensic analysis of companies that have failed. Sears, I talk about in my book, for instance, and Bed and Bath. It's like, what, like I always would love to be in the room, in the executive boardroom when they all basically kind of look at each other and agree, we're not going to make it. Like we don't believe anymore that this is going to happen or this is going to work or whatever.
Even if file the paperwork.
Yeah. Even if it's like just some decision that they make or a look that they give each other from across the room is like, yeah, we're doing all this stuff, but is it really? So I think there is a point when organizations lose their belief, lose their collective belief that it can happen. And that's when the wheels just completely fall off. And the demise can be pretty quick after that.
Right.
I think it's a little sadder when they do believe they can change and they just don't have the awareness, like they're trying to solve problems that nobody has anymore, for instance, or things like that. They're trying to hold on to an idea that maybe isn't resonating anymore, doesn't really work for the times, things like that. But they just fervently believe it. So the bottom line is, if you want to be a resilient organization, you need both. You need the belief and the awareness, like the awareness of the situation around you, the marketplace, the customer needs, all of that stuff. Those two things together will help an organization be resilient to survive the tough times and not end up like Bed Bath and Beyond.
Right. And when you work with your clients, I'm sure that there are times where you go in and it's like, nope, too late. But what is the point where somebody should say, oh my gosh, we need to bring in outside help and have it be effective and not oopsie daisy, we're a day late and $1 short? Yeah.
I think the outside help, like with Daggerwing, for instance, we're oftentimes called in because organizations do firmly believe in their future and they are actually bringing in an organization like Daggerwing because they feel that they're resilient, they're resilient, right? They want to keep going forward in a very strong and positive way. And they just look at the help that we can provide as something that accelerates their momentum and really helps them move forward much more quickly and effectively and things like that. So that's one way to know when it might be helpful to bring in some support is when you've already got a strong sense of belief, and a strong sense of awareness of the reality around you. Like, hey, I'm aware that, I really strongly believe in what we do. And I'm very much aware of what the capability of my current team is right now. They're great. And it would be even better if we brought in some extra people to sort of add fuel to the fire and get us going in a direction that really is going to, help us leapfrog some competition or expand our market share, whatever it is they're hoping to do. And that to me is a great reason to bring in an outside source. I think the not so great reason to bring in an outside resource would be when we're like, you don't know what to, like, you're just like, I'm
we're lost.
We're lost. Please fix me. Because I think when you kind of approach a consultancy that says, and you're like, please fix me. What is the consultancy going to do?
Right.
they're going to give you a long list of
Mm-hmm.
problems that they can help you solve.
Mm-hmm.
That
Which
you
you
will,
probably already knew existed.
right, and which you will pay for,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's not that helpful to be given a long list of problems, because
Yeah,
the more you look at
it's
problems,
depressing.
right? Well, you know, the confirmation bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like this idea of like, you know, if I say there's a problem, then
Mm-hmm.
everybody, you know, so I'd like you to go find problems. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do? You're going to go
Mm-hmm.
find problems. It's like when you're driving down the highway,
Mm-hmm.
you see a Honda CRV and you're like, oh, that's a Honda CRV.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, you see 50
Right. And especially
CRVs.
if you're wanting to buy one, right?
Yeah, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just
Mm-hmm.
raising it, it
Mm-hmm.
creates that awareness. Whereas if you're an organization that's constantly on the lookout for
Mm-hmm.
opportunities, or constantly on the lookout for the
Mm-hmm.
strengths of your organization that you want to leverage,
Right.
then that's what you're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be able to understand how to turn those into
Mm-hmm.
opportunities, and to help, you know, help you
Mm-hmm.
grow through the challenges that you're
Right.
facing.
Right. And you mentioned that several times in your book, and it is just kind of one of those common sense things where if you are looking for problems, you're going to find problems. If you're looking for positives, you will find positives.
Mhm.
And we see that, all the time in classrooms, in businesses, wherever it is. If you're expecting things to go wrong, they'll go wrong. I mean,
Mhm.
it's the whole self-fulfilling prophecy type of thing.
Absolutely.
But if you have faith in the people and your processes and all of those, then when something like COVID or a flood or a fire or a bigger competitor or whatever comes along, then you can work your way through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't like a Pollyanna idea where it's like
Right.
you just pretend
Just
problems don't
la la la
exist.
la la.
But there's a
Mm-hmm.
great quote from you know, a organizational development, you know, leadership
Mm-hmm.
guru legend Peter Drucker,
Mm-hmm.
who said, you know, the goal, or the role of leaders
Mm-hmm.
is to amplify strengths to the point where
Mm-hmm.
weaknesses become irrelevant. You know,
Right.
that's, I don't know if I got
Mm-hmm.
the quote exactly right, but the idea is to, you know, really not fixate
Mm-hmm.
on all the weaknesses and problems,
Right.
because then what happens when you fix a problem? You're
Mm-hmm.
just back to like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just like a setback, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
just back to zero.
Right.
You're not actually growing. You're
Mm-hmm.
not moving forward. You're just like fixing and
Mm-hmm.
getting back to zero.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yes, you have to like keep the ship running,
Mm-hmm.
and you also have to think forward and think about the opportunities as well.
Right. Yeah. And to see those problems as a way to get better, as you said. I was thinking like computer systems would be a great example.
Mhm.
Your folks are telling you they're just adequate. We need to replace these, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's going to cost a lot of money. But then, okay, when we replace them, here's what's going to happen. We'll be able to fulfill orders twice as quickly.
Mhm.
We'll be able to cut costs. We'll be able all of those various things. So yeah, you take that not really a negative. It's you take that situation and just grow from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the hard, sometimes those are hard conversations where you
Mm-hmm.
have to lay out the reality for
Right.
people
Mm-hmm.
that they might not
Mm-hmm.
want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we are, you know, like we're changing, you know, from this system to that system
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, when people are so used to
Mm-hmm.
the other one and their ways of working,
Right.
they've built their, or maybe they built their
Mm-hmm.
career around it, all their
Mm-hmm.
routines and everything they know, and they feel totally lost
Mm-hmm.
with this new thing. They don't embrace the spirit of
Mm-hmm.
curiosity or whatever, and they're
Right.
not like lifelong learners or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. You know, that's really tough for people.
Mm-hmm.
But um, the best thing an organization can do, I think, to create the kind of resilient environment that they need to survive, is to be honest and straightforward about
Right.
stuff, even when it's challenging.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so this idea of uh, la- providing a really crystal clear view of what reality is. I talk
Mm-hmm.
about that a lot in my book. It's like, you know, sometimes organizations get in this state of like, you know, they want to massage the truth a little bit, or they want
Mm-hmm.
to massage
We're
reality.
not going to tell you we're going to have to lay off a certain number. We're
Yeah,
just,
you know, it's okay, it's fine, you
Mhm.
know, there isn't, you know, and they kind of are a little bit, you know, not, maybe not as forthcoming or
Mhm.
not as transparent.
Mhm.
And that
Oh,
ultimately,
it bites you.
ultimately does, right? So, people remember that stuff, and people do, it's a trust eroding
Right.
action to say one thing and do another, especially at scale in an organization. You have to be, I mean, if you're going to say anything, the truth is always a good
Right.
idea,
Right. Yeah.
even if it hurts.
Right. Years ago, I worked for a big financial company and we did some mergers and acquisitions. And so we had multiples of things. And so, I mean, it made common sense that people were going to have to go, that there were going to have to be transitions.
Mhm.
And I happened to be the head of communications. So, I was the person in charge of that messaging.
Mm.
And the problem was we didn't know. We just didn't know. Hadn't really determined yet all of these various things. But we gave it lots of corporate speak, all these various things. And if they had just said, we don't know, but we'll tell you when we do, people would have gone okie dokie. We tried to tell them also that the vacuum was the worst thing. If you don't give information at all, everybody makes it up. And they almost never make it up good, right? It's not going to be, our company's going to go, they're going to triple. Yeah. It's like, no, they're going to lay all of us off. And so, even if you don't know, that's okay to tell people we don't know, but we'll get you the answers when we do. Then they're going to go, all righty, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Yes. And I think even these days with the kind of the attitudes of workers are changing, have changed a lot over the last several years. People are not only kind of expecting or anticipating that, they're demanding transparency, right? They're like, if you're not going to be straight with me, I'm leaving. And they're like, they put up with zero nonsense,
especially these darn millennials.
Well, I think even, I've
for them though, right?
Like people in their late career. I just saw a story about a guy who's like, rather than come back to the office, I'm going to retire. It's like they want everybody back in the office. I'm like, forget it. I don't feel like commuting. I'm just going to, walk my dogs every day. So I think a lot of people just are adopting this new, a lot of people's ideas and attitudes around work have changed. And it's, I think, across the generations.
Right.
People just have a different social contract now with the workplace, and organizations need to recognize that.
Right. And again, be honest. And then of course the worst things that we see are when they try and force things. You will come into the office again, or you will be fired. And how many times have we seen this now in these last months? And the employees are like, okay, bye. And of course we all know that to get good employees is very expensive. That you don't just hire somebody and poof, they know what they're doing. There's a big cost to getting new employees. And so why not do everything you can to keep the ones that you have? And it's just, and it's funny because of course it makes the news because it's not the little companies, but it's the big companies, it's the Amazons, it's the Twitter, it's, all of those where they're saying you will come back into the office. And then what surprises me is when the employees say no, and then the management's surprised. It's like, I can work at home in my jammies and not put shoes on and be as productive, or I can commute an hour each way. I can do all this stuff. Which one do you think I'm going to choose? Now, I am a firm believer that there are definitely advantages to being in a workplace, physically together. It's all these various things. But I think that there are just so many people now who are going, nope, I like being home in my jammies and my bare feet.
Yeah, and I think the question leaders can ask themselves is if they want a resilient organization, they want people back in the office, let's say, what's their approach, right? And we do a lot of strategic work at Daggerwing Group with organizations that have done some, remote work policy evolution. And things like that, trying to create a strong employee value proposition, a strong workplace culture, all of these things. And there's a couple of different choices that are made sometimes. One is like the very directive, demanding,
right? You will,
which is very, very tone deaf and does not take into account the reality of the situation, which is the worker mindset has changed. Then there's the other kind of choice that a lot of companies, or some very effective, resilient companies, are taking, which is, we're just going to create a great workplace in the office and let you decide which value proposition works better for you. And they're trying to stack the deck, to say, like, we're going to create really great on-site workplace experiences where people feel warm, welcome, this, that, and the other thing. And then it's like, well, if people are having such a great experience at work when they're at work at the office, well, maybe I'll just do that. So they self-select into this process. The organization gets what they want, which is everybody back in the office, and they, suddenly rent makes sense now. But it's not a directive. It's more of a collaborative, experiential process where it's like, hey, we definitely want you back. We're not going to mandate it, but we are going to create the conditions that make it very attractive for you to want to come back to the office. And that's a culture solution, not a process solution. As we talked about in the very, very beginning, when there's a problem, what do organizations tend to try to do? They try to, get out the wrench and the screwdriver and try and
just pound that poor little nail in that square hole. Yeah.
The directive, that's the fixing the engine, fixing the problem. And then this other process where you try and create a great workplace environment is more of a abundance mindset, or a solutions orientation, or an opportunity orientation. But the end result is people at work that are happy, want to be there, productive, as opposed to the other place, we've got, people scared to death. They can't afford to quit. They go into the office, they're miserable, they're terrified, and they spend half their time looking for a new job anyway.
Right. Let's talk about stress in the workplace, because that's often what happens, obviously, in these situations, COVID or no COVID. I mean, clearly this has been going on for so long, where, the workplace is hostile, such a negative place. I mean, all of these various things, even if it's just that this is the way we've always done it, we don't want your input. We don't want any of your suggestions. Why is stress in a workplace so bad? Where do we begin, right?
Well, first of all, workplace stress is a constant. I think there's always going to be a little bit of workplace stress, just because it's work, right? There's always there's
deadlines. There's things that.
But what we're talking about is chronic workplace stress, where people are actually physically affected because they go to work. Toxicity, belittlement, marginalization, cruel punishments, all that stuff. It has been a problem for a long time. In fact, only 5 or 6 years ago, the World Health Organization declared workplace stress as a global epidemic, that affects GDP in every country, but in the tens of billions of dollars, right?
Because if you're not happy, you're not going to do your best work.
And you might not even go to work, right? You'll just
you sabotage it, even worse.
Sabotage it, stay home, get sicker, you're in the hospital more often, or at the doctor more often. You're tapping into those resources that the governments are funding, for instance, that kind of stuff. Depressive symptoms, all the stuff, then rippling into your family life. You kick the dog, all that nonsense, right? That happens. But another alarming statistic, and this is the one that really kind of got me stopped in my tracks, was Jeffrey Pfeffer, who's a Stanford University professor, wrote a book called Dying for a Paycheck. And the marquee statistic that he cited in this book was that the workplace is the 5th leading cause of death in the United States. And that is just unacceptable. It's alarming and unacceptable.
And I'm assuming you're not talking really about workplace violence, but more things like heart attacks and things like that.
Absolutely. Although, there are some stats around workplace violence that are just as alarming. But yes,
and unfortunately growing.
So, but yes, all of the life-shortening symptoms that arise when you're when you're existing in a high stress environment all the time. I mean, the body is not meant to be peaked in, in that mode for extended.
Yeah, your adrenaline can only go high for so long.
Right. It's meant to be very short bits. So, when it comes to, why that's the case, it's all of those things that we've been talking about, where there's, people are looking for problems, and when you look for problems, naturally you look for who to blame. Then, there's economic factors that are reducing workforces. So, but the work doesn't get smaller. More people are doing more work, less resources, more pressure, and I think now that we're facing a recession, I think we're also going to see a return to these folks who believe they can't quit because they're just economically tied to their workplaces, and they feel desperate or hopeless, and that's that's a recipe for high stress right there, for sure.
Right. So we've only got a couple minutes left. How do we solve this problem? Which means we have to have you on again, because clearly this is a discussion that is much longer. But how do we fix this problem?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways that organizations can really work to end the workplace stress epidemic. And I think it really just goes back to those fundamentals of how to create resilience at an individual level, that you can apply them to organizations, right? So having being honest with people about the situation that they're in, even if it's challenging news, being transparent and forthcoming about where the organization is, what its strategy is, where it's heading. And I think being vulnerable and transparent in that way gives people a sense of direction, and nothing reduces stress like knowing where you're going.
Right.
If you only see this far ahead, that's stress. But if you can see the horizon,
right, because there's a train out there that's going to run you over, right?
It's called hope. Well, it's hope, right? So if you feel like if you can see a little bit down, across the landscape a little bit, you feel like you have choices. You feel like you have options because you can actually go somewhere and not just kind of confront this challenge right in front of your face. Also, I think organizations can really explore what resources they have at their disposal that they may be forgetting about. Right? So when an individual is in a moment of peak stress, they forget their peripheral vision narrows. They forget all of the resources like their loving, compassionate spouse, or their friend group over here, or their dog that they can pet, or whatever. Right? So organizations do the same thing. They forget that they've got a lot of great resources at their disposal when they're in their tight little, hijacked mode. All of the talent that's there, the experience, the expertise, the history, the challenges that they've overcome before, the intellectual property, all of that stuff tends to be forgotten when they're. So if people explore that, recognize it, and take that on board and leverage it more often, then I think they're going to be a much more resilient organization, less susceptible to that kind of like panicked, stress-inducing behavior that makes everybody really uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah, because bad things are going to happen. I mean, that's just the way things are. And as they say, bad things happen to good people. But yeah, whether it's another epidemic, whether it's a recession, whether it's a flood, a fire, something that comes along to compete with Amazon, all of those various things. And so just being prepared is so much, let's be Boy Scouts, right? We're going to be prepared. And that really is a big part of it, is just knowing, what, we've got the people and the resources where we can weather those storms. As you said, we can move that sail to a different direction.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, definitely. I think the, one of the, benefits, or one of the lessons I think that have come out of this book is this idea that we've earned the right to have headwinds. Like when we're the fact that we're moving forward at all as an organization means that you're going to have a little bit of wind blowing in your face. So if
you're going to have competitors, you're going to have all sorts of things.
Yeah, so you've earned the right to have some of these challenges, and it's okay to expect them. The way to be prepared for them is to make sure that you've developed the courage and confidence to grow through those challenges.
I love it. Well, oh my gosh, we only have a couple minutes left. And so please tell us first how they get your book, and then a little bit more about how to reach you, the services that you provide, things like that.
Absolutely. Well, my book is available on Amazon. There's a book website, reinventingresilience.com, where you can learn a little bit more about the model that I created, the book, some of my story, and some a press packet and how to book me for speaking things.
Got a blog there, great blog posts.
Yeah, some great stuff there. I try to keep the writing the writing muscles active after finishing a book. But in terms of reaching out to help with your organization and trying to create a resilient organization, Daggerwinggroup.com is where I work. I've got unbelievable resources there to help organizations really think through how to do change right the first time. Where we love to work shoulder to shoulder with our clients. We're not directive problem seekers. We're partners with our clients that really want to do great things in the world and help them achieve their business objectives.
Right. And we mentioned that you work with Fortune 100s. What if you're not quite a Fortune 100?
Totally okay. So we have a great referral network. I have a great referral network. So if there's other smaller consultancies that can help, my goal is to make sure people get the help they need so that they are not feeling stuck when those inevitable challenges do arise. So what I would love for people to do, in fact, is to, go to my website, go to reinventingresilience.com, sign up for just to be added to my newsletter list. What I can do is create a little conversation group or a little round table for people who want to talk about how can I help my organization become more resilient down the road. Maybe there's other like-minded people I can connect folks with and things like that.
Right. Well, and there's as much as we like to think there's nothing anymore that's unique. And so we learn from others. Yeah. And and I think that's what is so good about groups and things like that, whether it's online, offline, on social media, whatever, we can learn from others, from their positives and their negatives.
Absolutely. Indeed. Which is the one thing I would love to leave with your listeners is this idea that, it's the story of my name. So my last name is Thallner, and I found out when I was traveling in Austria that my name is actually an old-time occupation. And it means a person who was hired in a village to guide someone through a mountain pass from one valley to the next valley. Like, just imagine, you need to bring your cows over from this valley over to that valley. So I guess that was an occupation long ago, but it's very relevant to the work that I do now, because I try to help organizations that are stuck in a valley, even though there may be fertile valleys, figuring out how to get out of the valley they're in that might not be productive or helpful for them, over that challenging mountain pass and into the next fertile valley where they can really grow and thrive.
So I love it. Advice, so you were predestined.
I was predestined
to be doing this.
And that's my advice to all your listeners. They should also feel like they can be Thallners too. They can guide their organizations and organizations that they care about from one place to the next. And I think with the resilience model that I created, it might be a great starting point to help on that journey.
Perfect. I love it. Well, I am Deb Creer. I've been speaking with Paul Thallner, and we can all be Thallners. He is the author of Reinventing Resilience, How Organizations Move Beyond Setbacks and Grow Through Challenges. As I said, we have to have you on again simply because we just scratched the surface on this. So we will do that. But until then, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.